Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Master Series, your guide to intelligent production, brought to you by Entertainment Partners. I'm your host, Natalie Nelson. In the Master Series, we address the issues impacting the entertainment industry and its workers through in-depth discussions with legal, tax, payroll, technology, and production experts. And today, our expert panel will be sharing best practices to help you prepare for post and delivery, including tips for budgeting, working with a post supervisor, and pitfalls to avoid, which will save you big in the end. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started today. First, we encourage you to join the conversation by posting questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom call. You can do so by clicking the Q&A icon in the navigation menu. Also, please take a few seconds after today's webinar to answer a short feedback survey. This gives an opportunity for you to share feedback with us, as well as suggest topics for future webinars. Your feedback is very important, and we thank you for it. Now I am pleased to introduce you to today's panelists. Today we are joined by producer Luca Borghese, known for producing credits including Love Me, the Persian version, Diane, Monsters and Men, Minion, Goldie, Quitters, and Gabriel. A partner in AGX alongside Ben Howe, Luca's films have screened at major festivals worldwide, including Sundance, South by Southwest, Directors Fortnight, Locarno, and Tribeca. His films have been distributed theatrically, both internationally and domestically, by Neon, Sony Pictures Classics, IFC, Oscilloscope Laboratories, and Strand Releasing, among others. His co-producing credits include Nyad, Beau is Afraid, Spaceman, Mr. Holmes, Time Out of Mind, Norman, and Rampart. And his post-production supervising credits include Okja, Lost City of Z, 999, Young Adult, The Beaver, The Messenger, and Anvil, The Story of Anvil. Also joining us today is producer and post-production expert Mike Jackman. Mike is a seasoned film and television producer and entrepreneur with over 35 years of experience in all aspects of motion pictures, from production and development to post-production and global distribution. His expertise uniquely combines traditional creative prowess, hands-on producing skills, and a deep understanding of emerging technologies. Most recently, he served as Executive Vice President of Physical Production and Post at FilmNation Entertainment, where his notable credits included co-producer on the Academy Award-winning film Arrival, executive producer on the Tom Hanks World War II naval drama Greyhound, and producer on The Good Nurse, starring Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. Prior to FilmNation, Mike oversaw construction and operations of a state-of-the-art 45,000 square foot production facility for Ronald O. Perlman's Deluxe Entertainment in New York City. He also served as Senior Vice President of Post-Production for the Weinstein Company and Dimension Films, post-supervised on a string of Academy Award-nominated films, including Gangs of New York, The Aviator, and the documentary Super Size Me, as well as associate producer on the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. His upcoming thriller, Conclave, will be released in theaters across the U.S. in November in 2024 by Focus Features. Rounding out today's panel is post-production accountant Rachel Schneider. Rachel is a post accountant at Trevanna Post. After graduating from the University of Michigan, she started her career at Trevanna as an assistant accountant. Over the next few years, honing her skills and assisting on many projects, she worked her way up to key post accountant. With 11 years of experience from small independent films to major studio projects, she has become a mentor for colleagues across all of Trevanna's offices and a resident expert in the New York tax credit. Her notable credits include Beau is Afraid, Uncut Gems, The Good Nurse, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Honora, and the forthcoming Wolves, premiering on Apple TV Plus in September. And finally, moderating today's discussion is our financing and production expert who is also celebrating a birthday today, John Hadity, Executive Vice President of the Incentives Group here at Entertainment Partners, where he specializes in the monetization of tax credits and minimum guarantees. John began his career at Orion Classics, a division of Orion Pictures, where he served as technical and administrative director. He is former president and CEO of Hadity and Associates, a consultancy firm that specializes in risk management and production finance. He is former executive vice president of motion picture and television production finance for Miramax Films, and his recently financed projects include Snowden, American Made, and The Assistant. Hello, panelists, and thank you for joining us. It is wonderful to see you this morning and this afternoon. I know many of you coming in from the East Coast. John, I'm going to pass things over to you. I know you have a lot to get to, so take it away.
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Hey, listen, and thanks for the birthday wishes. Nothing could be better than spending it with like good buddies and hundreds of people you don't know. So really, I appreciate it. Thanks. Um, and listen, I want to start by saying like what inspired me to do this webinar. You know, as most people know, or I hope they know, entertainment partners lends against tax credits, right? And there are 7 or 8 states out there, like New York, Pennsylvania, California, Massachusetts, that require you finish the film or you don't get your tax credit, right? So, you know, when I'm looking at these potential loan opportunities, you know, I have to make sure they don't run out of money, because if they run out of money, there's no certificate, right? And so I don't get paid back. So it really started me thinking I really have to engage with post experts to make sure that productions are well prepared for the cost of finishing a film or a TV project. So hence we're having this conversation. So one of the things that my friend Mike Jackman said to me and has said to me over the years is post starts in prep. So, you know, and as I said, you know, I'm looking at these projects and some of them haven't even been completely financed yet, right? But I'm looking at the budgets and I'm going, is that going to be enough to actually complete and deliver this project? So, Mike, I think that's a perfect segue into why do you tell me that?
It's a great segue, and thanks for having all of us. Thanks for having me and inviting me, and hello everyone who's watching, listening. Um, because basically, it's a little bit like you need to know where you're going in order to start walking in the direction of where you want to be. So, you know, if you're going west, you got to know you're going which way to start taking that first step. Post production is very much like that. From you know, especially in areas where um, you know, if there's visual effects, which we'll get into later, that can start before anything. And when you're budgeting your movie, you need to understand what it is that you have to have in that budget in order to allocate an appropriate amount. So, as you said, so you can finish your movie and actually have the deliverables that you're going to need at the end of the production. You should know, you know, if you can know on a bigger film, am I delivering this to studio for worldwide? Am I delivering it to a streamer for worldwide? Am I delivering it to, you know, an international sales company and a distributor? So that's 2 sets of deliverables. Are there 2 distributors that are getting it plus an international sales company? So there could be 3 sets of deliverables. You know, and what kind of movie am I making? So do I need to be allocating a lot of money for visual effects? Do I need my sound to be, you know, a huge Atmos mix, or, you know, can it be smaller? Do I not have to spend that extra money? There's just a lot of different things that you need to think about. So it begins in prep because you budget the movie. And when you're budgeting that movie even before you prep, and if you budget incorrectly, you will pay for it later, either by paying more because of things that you forgot about, or by running out of money and having to scramble.
So if let's say you're a first-time producer, right? And you're putting that budget together, how do you even know what to put in the budget? Like where do you start?
And basically there are delivery schedules, right, that are sort of standard. You can get your boilerplate, you know, studio delivery schedules that itemize the things you need. But really, you start by getting yourself a post supervisor who can help you figure out what you should put in post production, who can read the script and help you decide what it is that I need to include here. From, you know, is this a big visual effects movie? Is it a big music movie? And then also your production stuff, your dailies, you know, is part of sort of post production, and decisions you make about your finishing houses is part of, kind of has to be done in prep. But it starts by getting yourself somebody who understands what it is that post is all about and can just advise. And that, I think you can engage. I think it's a great idea to engage a post supervisor during your budgeting process and prep for like a week. And, read the script, review the script, look at VisFX, maybe call some houses to get some current bids based on the script so that you're not sort of casting around in the dark and making, an estimate. And it's like, yeah, I think 50 grand will be great for VisFX. You put it in and it's locked in and everyone, it can get signed off on because people assume that the research has been done and it's a $500,000 VisFX show. And that's not knowable. I mean, it's knowable, but it's not simple. It's not like, oh, everybody knows this. You can read it and go, oh, this is clearly this. I mean, sometimes you can, right? If there's like, if there's space aliens and lots of explosions and things like that, you'll start to get a sense of things. But it does take some expertise in various parts of it to really know what to do.
So let me ask you this. With, let's say, first-time filmmakers, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know how to find a post supervisor, right? If they wanted to take a stab at looking at a delivery schedule, a very standardized delivery schedule, where would you find that? Where would you get something like that if you don't really have contacts?
Well, I think at some point you're going to have some kind of contact. And whether that's, through somebody Rachel has access, has seen lots of delivery schedule, obviously Luca and myself, but if you're budgeting the movie, somebody is helping you with that budget probably, or gave you a budget template to work with. Or you can get in touch with the Post New York Alliance, you can Google it and find out. You could I'm guessing there's a lot of delivery schedules available. You don't want to just go off a random one that you find online, but you can probably start reaching out, to organizations within the film community where somebody will be able to guide you a little bit. It's not, they're very similar. There are big differences, say, between a theatrical traditional delivery schedule and a streamer, just because there's some major elements that wind up different. In terms of the priority and sometimes the cost. But my first thought would be, the problem is you don't know what you don't know, right? Right. But if you're a first-time filmmaker, you're hopefully getting some help from some people who have a little bit of knowledge who can help you. If you're just out there making a movie and spending, 15 grand, which I've done to make a feature, all in. I knew a little more at the time, but then you're just going to make the movie and you're not going to have deliverables. You're going to have a thing and you're not going to worry about it because hopefully somebody wants it, or you can monetize it, or you can get it in festivals, and then you'll scramble around to make the few elements that you need for festivals. But if it's any kind of film that you expect to hopefully be, that you plan to be selling initially, you expect to have a distributor, you want to have that money in place, then you should be able to reach out and get some contacts. Again, I would Google it. But, a lot of films, it's not bad or wrong for a first-time filmmaker to just go, I need the money to make the movie, and then figure it out from there. Once you have the thing that you can show, you can get some more help and you can find some more money. And if you sell to a distributor, there will be some money for that, and you can use some of that to create the deliverables that you don't have.
And Luca, let me ask you, so because you produce, but you also do post supervision, when do you, first of all, do you go looking for projects or do people go looking for you?
The impossible question to answer. Usually at this point, I'd say it's incoming, just so good because I've been doing it for a long time. But, every now and then something will come up that I'll be like, oh, that looks really interesting. And I'll go sniff around for it. But generally people are approaching me about projects. And what Mike said is really true. I think you have to kind of divide movies into two categories. Like there are types of movies where you have counterparties and there are types of movies where you don't. And like if you're making $1.5 million movie that you've like gone out to friends and family, or you've found an angel investor and you're making your first film, there's not going to be a counterparty. There's not going to be someone telling you this is what you have to do to get the movie distributed. So in that case, like Mike says, it's sort of like, do your best. It's going to be a little rocky. Hopefully you sell it. You can deal with the delivery then. Any other kind of movie where you actually have engaged distribution counterparties, like your first stop is always to ask them, because every single company is going to have a different set of requirements and a different process. And those things are all, although they won't say this out loud, they are all negotiable. So getting that information immediately is important so you can start talking about what's possible and what's not for your movie. I will say, I do think there was a question in the Q&A. When we talk about delivery schedules, we're talking about the list of requirements that you need to satisfy a distributor. But in general, I'd say, and Mike, disagree with me if you don't feel this way, like the cost of deliverables has gotten a lot less in the last 20 years. And in a lot of ways, the complexity has gotten a lot less. But the sort of like intricacies of like what rando flavor of QuickTime like this distributor wants versus this distributor, that's all very specific, and people will make you do things over. So you really have to be in a dialogue with the person who you're delivering to like do a good job and not waste money.
I'm sorry. Are you saying it's become less expensive because it's more digitized? Like everything is just
like we used to spend $100,000 on film negatives like easily on a movie,
right?
And we don't do that anymore. So it's cheaper.
Yeah, no, completely. And but what Luca says is correct. Even in like terms of color, there's color spaces, right? There's different kinds of color. Literally, it's very technical in the weeds, but there's HDR color space, which is high dynamic range, and there's standard dynamic range, and then and there was digital cinema color space, and there used to be film color space, and there's video master color space, and all these things sort of don't matter when you're just making your one final version. But then different distributors say, no, we want the main version to be in this color space. Then you go spend a lot of money in that color space. And that, again, that's fine if someone's paying you for it. But it's very much in the weeds, and they have very different specifications. And that's for that full delivery. So when you have that, third party that you're actually delivering to, Luke is 100% right. Get the exact specific things that they want to do it that way, because they will make you do it over again. But when you're just making your one for the festivals, it sort of doesn't matter. It's whatever is going to, look the best when you present it. And then you're going to have to make other versions when someone hopefully buys it, licenses it.
So Rachel, let me ask you this. So because we're going to talk next about how to really select and service a great post-production supervisor. And I know you and Luca have worked together. And so I know that you guys work really well together and have a great relationship. But you've been at Trevanna Post for 11 years. So there must have been post supervisors that are below the Luca Borghese grade. So I'm guessing you've run the gamut, right? You've worked with supervisors and not so great post supervisors. What's your? I mean, this is a very candid question, but what's the first indication you get that, oh boy, I'm not working with somebody of the caliber of Luca?
Communication, I think, is a big one. Like if you're not hearing from the post supervisor, or you're getting bills or things are coming through that you have no idea about, like that sometimes raises a red flag of like, there's not, the communication flow is not making its way towards me so I can accurately reflect what's happening in the movie. I also think like there are some post supervisors who are really good at all the technical stuff and all of the like creative and piece of it, but are not as strong on the financial side and like the the balance of someone understanding the numbers, I guess. So in that case, like it's sometimes easy to tell with that. So I just make sure that I'm really communicative with them. I follow up, I ask questions. If I don't see POs come through, sometimes I'll just ask them of like what they're expecting to come. Sometimes I'll start a project and I won't have like the bids of what they expect to spend in sound and DI, and those can be different from what was budgeted. So I always make sure to ask for those pieces of information, because if I start with those pieces of information, I have a basis of what they're expecting to happen. And if things come in differently, I can kind of cater to how I'm going to communicate with them or ask the questions of that sort of stuff. So yeah, you kind of just have to feel it out. I feel like being over communicative at the beginning is really helpful, just to kind of like feel the dynamic, especially if you haven't worked with a person before, and to kind of understand how they work and what makes the most sense to them.
So,
and John, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because I have to say this in a public forum.
Yeah.
So Rachel is the best post accountant, period, out there.
Thank you.
And having Rachel on a show, honestly, is like having another producer helping you and watching your back. It is a different experience than you have with most, because she's so knowledgeable and she's so proactive. She really knows what's going on, and like just the answer to her questions makes that obvious. But it really is having an amazing team, and that's, to me, it's like it really is like having another producer on the show. So.
Thank you.
Rachel, just have to say that in a forum where people like you.
Nice. Well, listen, I have to tell you, as a financier, my lifeline is with the accountant on a show, because I'm always worried that a production is going to run out of money, right? And so it's the accountant and the cost reporting that they do that will either raise a red flag or not about, are they going to have enough money to finish this project? Because if they don't, they have to go back. The producer is not producing anymore. Now they're a fundraiser again, and they've got to go out and raise more money. And sometimes with success and sometimes not successful. So yeah, I've always said, even as a studio executive, I was like, the accountant is like key. So Mike, there was an interesting question that we got about, there was somebody that was on the post services side and wanted to know how producers like to be approached and what factors into the decision they use to choose a post house. And so I want to ask you that question, but also combine it with how best, like if there's a Luca out there, right, that wants to approach you about some hot project that you have, like as a producer, what's the best way for these folks to approach you?
Great question, though. I think I'm going to Luca with projects, but it's a whole thing. I was going to say we don't like to be approached, but that's not true. We do. It's very helpful. I mean, it's not the best thing to like, every 2 months to get an email about, what's going on, what's a new project, because one of the things that you want to figure out how to avoid is to give Luca homework when you're reaching out, right? Like we're busy. We're happy to answer a question. We're happy to let you know stuff, but it's like, I got to go digging around about what's this project or that project. You're asking me about 15 projects that maybe my company was doing. It just creates work for me. And then, if that's a pattern, then every time I see an email, I'm going to be like, now I got something to do. If I'm going to, I don't even want to open this email because now it's going to give me stuff more to do. Right. So it's a balance of reminding us that you're there, right? Because again, we deal with lots and lots of people and vendors, and it's very easy for us to get stuck on the, flavor of the month. We've done this project for the last, this vendor for the last few projects. So let's just go there because it's easy, but it's helpful to kind of know. So I would say, what I prefer is, hey, here's what we're doing. we just did this project and we just opened a stage over here, and we have now great connectivity and are working with a partner in London, and saw an announcement about, this show, and if we can help, that would be great. And something that is much less, again, gives me something that I have to do, but is informing me of, in a friendly way of the services and status of your company, I would say is kind of the best way to do it. It is very helpful also when it's specific, so the every few months of just checking in can feel like a little bit, like a slog, but hey, I saw an announcement about this film and we just did this other film with the same director, or the cinematographer loves doing work with blah, 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 or our sound designers did something with, the director 2 films ago. That's information that's helpful for me that I may not automatically know. And that kind of reframes a project. Or, hey, we just got an uptick in our, visual effects tax credit, and we can cash flow it for you. And, that's like, oh, great. I might not have known that. And that's helpful information. So I would say the approach should be sort of status and giving me information that I could use relative to the project and the services. That's my gut.
Right. And Luca, when you're heavily focused on post on a project, what seems to have been the most successful outcome based on the most successful process? I mean, Rachel has been talking about communication, which obviously is key. We've talked about getting involved sooner rather than later, right? Especially if there's a distributor involved. But, in most cases, there aren't in the independent film world, right? They're relying on festival work, festival plays, and hopefully they'll get acquired at a festival without overburdening you. But if someone's really interested in hiring you, but without overburdening you too early in the process, what, from your perspective, is the best possible process and outcome?
I think it's never burdensome to have someone come to you with something early. Like, it's always helpful as long as they're listening. It's so much easier for me to have time to actually make the best plan for a movie than to be called 3 weeks before they start shooting and try to figure it out at the last minute. A lot of the decisions that you need to help make get made very far out. So like, if I know a certain DP is involved with a project, and it's 8 weeks out or 12 weeks out, there's a lot of work I can do that will be helpful for the finishing process before we start shooting. And it's not just technical work. It's also well, who have you worked with before? Okay, let me go bid those 3 vendors. Let's see which one of them makes most sense for this movie. Let's see if we can do a little negotiation with them and get the best answer for the movie. So I don't think coming to someone early is ever a bad thing, as long as the movie's real at that point, which is always sort of a question mark. I guess one thing I think is complicated, especially if we're talking about the independent space, is the way those movies get made in general, unless you have a financier who's particularly generous, is there's a pot of money, and that's the only money you have to make the movie with. And you have to both be honest about what you think it's going to take and also be understanding what other departments' needs are. So I can't come in with the sort of gold standard process and plant my flag and say now everybody else figure your shit out. That doesn't work. Just like it doesn't work when production raids post-production to get the extra shoot day that the director wants. So it's not only about being maybe an expert or having been through the process a bunch of times. It's also about finding the way to make the best process for every department, not just yours. I think 2 things on that subject are particularly important. One is specific to visual effects, where you're working at lower budget levels, and identifying the way you want to utilize visual effects in a lower budget production upfront is totally crucial, because you cannot shoot things and add them later, but you really are going to have no idea how good it's going to look or how much it's going to cost. And I think the second thing is that you have to be honest with producers based on your understanding of the filmmakers, how long you think the project's going to take to complete. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something that's budgeted up front. It just has to be something that's like vocalized up front. Like, no one expects us to budget the entire movie outside the contingency except for entertainment partners. So as long as you're being communicative about what you think the potential needs are, I think you're doing a good job. One thing about just visual effects departments in general, like sometimes we have the luxury of working with like a standalone production side VFX department, and sometimes we don't. And it has to do with the lift and the budget level. So sometimes I'm wearing a post hat and a VFX hat, and sometimes I'm just wearing a post hat.
And if I may, because that's can I, John? That's a great answer. And there's two questions that I saw in the chat that that touches upon also. One was when I was talking about before, contact a post supervisor to help you figure out, things like your VFX. One of the question was, why not contact the VFX supervisor? And the answer is, of course. But if your post supervisor is going to give you a window into all of that, so the post supervisor may contact the VFX supervisor and a sound house and a DI facility and editing facilities and avid rental companies and dailies, And so when I said post supervisor, I meant that person who can be your linchpin to reach out to everyone. And yeah, sometimes post supervisor can give you a very simple take on VFX if you have an understanding of how, that it's very small. And most of the time, we're going to reach out, producer post supervisor is going to reach out and talk to their friends and other people they know who are VFX supervisors or VFX producers. So that was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to address was a really interesting question, and I think a really smart one, which was about a department head saying, hey, I get a script and from a producer, and I'm asked to budget it, and I budget my department and it scares them away. What do you do? And the answer is everybody's budget scares us away, because, our own budgets, when I do a budget, when Luca does a budget, we sit down, Rachel does post budget, we just do a budget. It always comes in so much higher than we can possibly make a movie for. It just does, because that's our process, right? What I would suggest, and then we winnow it down to figure out how, what we don't need and where do we overdo something or where can we get a deal. I'd suggest for a department head, when they come back to me with, here's my construction budget, or here's my lighting budget, or here's my costume budget, that they then come with ideas on how we're going to reduce that. Because yes, it's true, this is your estimate right now in a vacuum of what it's going to cost. But we're not going to be in a vacuum. Ultimately, we're going to be in real discussions with the director and with the producers and, with maybe sometimes with the bond company and all the other stakeholders about that department budget. And I'm going to say, okay, that's 20% more than we have. What can we do about it? And so if you want to come forward with suggestions or ideas that say, here's what we're doing, but if we could reduce this by X, if we didn't have to hand make 200 costumes, but could instead do something like this, if there were 47 speaking parts instead of 92 speaking parts, then, I could do something different. And if I could have a discussion with the director and the cinematographer about how they're planning to shoot the scene with 100,000 people in a stadium, that could be helpful. So I think you want to come with some answers when you come with that department budget, so that the feeling is, because we always expect it to be too high, because it's always going to be too high, because, you just budget it and you're not thinking about what your parameters are. Give us the knowledge that you're there to collaborate and help figure out the answer. And I think that will help. You don't want to get rid of stuff that you think is important. You want to come to the table with the knowledge that we're going to have to make some changes and compromises, because that's what it is. And I'll say one other thing, like I say this a lot. Actually, a friend of mine, Tobias Lindholm, directed, amazing director, did The Good Nurse, and which I produced. And we had all these conversations, and we had Netflix that funded us, but even still, there was like the budget was too high. I swear to God, I could have $150 million to make a movie, and I'd need like another five. But he said, if you want to really screw over a director, give him everything he wants, or give her everything he wants. And I think what he was saying was the challenge, like the necessary creative versus financial, physical production push and pull, makes you think about what it is you want to shoot, makes you have to defend in your own mind what it is you want to shoot, how do you want to do it, what you're getting from it. And a lot of times leads to smart creative decisions. Sometimes it's pre-editing, right? Like that scene, we don't even need that scene. That scene actually is hurting us because it's taking away tension from the scene later on. Sometimes it's, how do we want to shoot this? It reads really big, but what the director was looking for was just the one moment in the middle of this big thing. And those are valuable because you take money away from stuff that you don't need and allows you to afford to put it towards something that you do need. And that push and pull, respectfully done, I think is a huge value in filmmaking.
That's a great response. And I'll tell you, I don't know if we were working together at the time. Miramax said "Talented Mr. Ripley." I can't remember.
No, I don't think so.
But I remember Anthony Minghella, writer, director, producer, right? I remember having a conversation with him over the fact that the opening scene in The Talented Mr. Ripley, the movie, was supposed to take place in Venice, and a cruise ship was meant to arrive in the port in Venice. And Gwyneth Paltrow's character was meant to get off the boat, and this was going to cost millions and millions of dollars. And I remember having this heart-to-heart with Anthony saying, we can't afford this. Like, we just can't. This is millions of dollars. So let's figure out a way to capture what you want to capture without spending millions and millions of dollars. And he said, I got it. We'll just film a doc, and we'll just CGI in the background the cruise ship. Like, there's no cruise ship there. We'll green screen it, but we'll have the luggage on the dock, and we'll have Gwyneth on the dock. And, and I was like, oh my God, we saved millions of dollars, which ultimately we needed for post. Right. And so Rachel, I got to ask you, because I know for a fact I've had clients that have produced films, excuse me, where the producer has been the post supervisor as well. And sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're not so good.
Yes.
Right? So, yes. In my mind, hiring a post supervisor is like money really well spent, right? Because they know what you don't know.
Yes. And
so I'm going to ask you point blank. I don't want you to name names, but please confirm you have experienced that where you're like, oh my God, if they had just hired a post super, we would not be dealing with this.
Yes. A lot of times, a post supervisor is thinking about like exactly the things that, you need to do to finish a film, whereas a producer might be thinking about, their relationship with the director and the filmmaker, and making sure that that's copacetic and that they're completely like doing what they wanted, what the director, wants to complete, which is great. But you can't forget about like the small little things that have to happen, like bringing in actors for ADR and what that would cost, or stages, or your delivery, or, small things like that that can sometimes get lost if you don't have someone who is very well versed in post-production, who is also helping to supervise and shepherd that through.
Right. Hey, Luca, let me ask you, because we had a question in the chat about, let's say you have a film and you're in the budgeting process, but you already have a distributor, but the buyer has not delivered a delivery schedule to the production yet, and or says, it'll be the usual, right? And especially in this time of change where platforms are changing and deliverables are changing because of the digital platforms and all that stuff, how do you budget for deliverables when you're getting the response, oh, it'll be the usual?
Well, first of all, like, don't let other people make things your problem when they're not. Like, if somebody doesn't know what they want and you're locking a budget, that's not really like your problem. Like, you can make a best guess and put it in the budget, but until they send you the piece of paper and say, this is what you're going to have to send us, there's not much you can do about it. So I think my first answer to that question would be like, if we've already locked the budget and you receive a delivery schedule and the things they need aren't budgeted, I would ask that person how they want to fix the problem. That would be my first question. I think the other thing that you can do that's the question you asked at the very beginning is like, I have sort of an answer for that connects to this, which is like, how do you get information on this subject? Like, how do you connect with people who are experts at this? And one thing I'll say is that at least in New York City in the past, probably like 5 years, like all post supervisors in New York City are extremely well connected to one another. So if you know any of us, ask us a question. And if we don't know the answer, we'll either point you to someone who does, or we'll get you the answer from someone who does. We're all constantly in communication with each other, which hadn't been the case for many, many years, just because we had no sort of organizational principle. But since the pandemic, I've been in touch with basically every post supervisor in New York, like, all the time. So you can use us as a knowledge base. Like, we're here for you, your friendly neighborhood supervisor.
Right.
There's a question about access elements in here that I just would answer quickly, which is that regardless of who you're delivering to and what your requirements are, like as a producer, your job is to make sure the movie exists forever. So don't get yourself into a situation where you can't provide for the ongoing maintenance of the movie, regardless of the distribution situation. And there are very small requirements that you can budget for that will allow you to keep your movie archived in perpetuity. And like, I would just suggest that be part of your producing practice at absolute minimum, no matter what. Because the last thing you want to do is spend a bunch of money and spend a bunch of time on a project and then have a technical issue that makes a lot of that work vanish. So regardless of whether a distributor is asking for something, like make sure that you as a producer, if you're not giving that movie to somebody else, have a way of making sure that movie lives on forever.
And by the way, the value of that access is even less about, a distributor sometime down the road is going to want something, because they rarely do. It's your value of having that asset alive and well, so that when that 15-year license runs out, you have valuable assets that you can relicense as a producer and make some more money on. So that access, don't think of it for someone else. Think of it as that's your asset. That's something that you want to keep for yourself.
Right. Let me ask you something, Mike, because you've also been a studio executive. So when it comes to delivering to distributors or sub-distributors, I've always found that if in the agreement, rather than agree to deliver certain elements to a distributor, maybe a foreign distributor or a sub-distributor, if you just provide them lab access, so you deliver all the paperwork, you deliver all the stuff that you can deliver digitally, but providing them lab access so that they can produce whatever materials they need, whether it's a broadcast quality digital master or submaster or whatever, at least they're ordering it, they provide the purchase order, they get billed for it, And, possibly, you may get charged back for it, which will be taken out of your receipts from that distributor. But I would suspect that from a producer's perspective, that's a much better arrangement than having to agree to supply at your own expense all the stuff necessary to complete delivery.
Fair, and that's very true. I would say, though, the caveat there is most international sales on a film have that distributor paying for it. So even if you have to deliver it, and generally you're not, you're generally trying to give them access to the element at a lab, and they order it. So France, Italy, Germany, Spain, whatever, you say, go to this company, go to that company. This is where the master lives. Or you have to deliver an HD master to them, but they still have to pay for it. It's the US distributors or this worldwide deal with a streamer where the onus gets put on the producer to create all of those deliverables and pay for all those deliverables, because presumably you're getting a minimum guarantee, an MG, from that studio, and they plan to just have you take whatever piece of that minimum guarantee you are getting that costs, and cover the cost of those deliverables. But 100%, any place, honestly, just from a logistical perspective, if you're handling as a producer the elements for delivery to worldwide, much easier to just access it at, put it in one lab, say, here it is, this is where you access it, order what you want. And all those access letters do actually require, they basically say, it doesn't matter what anyone else owes, we, Germany, can order this and the lab will fulfill our order when we pay for it. So it's very standard, and you will 100%, it'll be deducted from whatever receipts that they would be giving you.
Right.
But it's just easier logistically to deal with it.
Yeah, I agree. Rachel, listen, there's a really interesting question in the chat. And let me preface it by saying that when I get an inquiry for a production loan, for a loan against a tax credit, and I ask them to send me the budget and a application form, if the budget comes in Excel, it goes in the trash. I'm like, if somebody sends me a budget in Excel for a feature film, you don't know what you're doing. So the question in the chat is, what are your favorite tools and platforms to keep track of ever-changing budgets, as well as spent hours budget that also works for producers and production managers?
Well, Movie Magic Budget is used as like the standard for film budgets. I would say, though, that like that's used in the budgeting process to get a locked budget. And at that point, most of the time, the locked budget stays locked budget, and people don't really mess with the Movie Magic file or budget for the film at that point. And then you have an accounting software like Smart Accounting. Other payroll companies have specific accounting softwares that the payroll speaks to, that gets set up with it's kind of how you cost report and measure everything against your budget. But for things like extensions, especially in post, when you're going from they want to see what it would cost if you went from a 30-week schedule to a 40-week schedule, and you're adding an extra assistant editor or whatever it is. I do find Excel very helpful in that specific scenario of when you're trying to estimate what an extension would cost or where you stand. Cost reports are great for the overall, and Movie Magic Budgets, it's great for a starting place and where you're locked. But we tend to use Excel to get from where you're starting, if you want to extend somewhere, what that costs and how that works. So that's, we use definitely, I love Movie Magic.
Right.
But it ends, I think, at the lock budget most of the time. People don't typically use it to update budgets throughout. If you have another unit that you're going to do that you need to budget for, they'll go back into Movie Magic for that specific like reshoot or additional photography. But I don't know if Luca or Mike, if you guys have any other softwares that you guys use as producers.
No, we just use Movie Magic. And like the only time I would like crack it open in the middle of a show is if we had to do a new shoot and I needed to sort of start a new unit from scratch, then I might do that. But otherwise, after the budget's locked, like I just call Rachel.
Agreed. I think there was one show that it was a really tight show, and I used the Movie Magic budget and I would actualize it like every week against the cost report. Mm-hmm. Just because I needed like as every little bit of detail, like, so rather than just assistant editor X, I needed assistant editor. I needed to know the weekends. I needed to know the overtime hours. And so I was literally like plugging all of that in very specifically to the Movie Magic budget and actualizing it. It wasn't like the greatest tool for that, but it was the easiest one for me because all that information was right in front of me. But generally, I now just call Rachel also.
Right.
I will say,
who, by the way, I have written into my Movie Magic budgets.
People don't universally use that program overseas. Like I've worked on plenty of stuff not in the US where people are using Excel in a way that works, especially sort of like less travel to locations.
Well, just so you know, because EP owns Movie Magic, we've now really, I mean, obviously we're all over the place in North America, but we now have an extremely strong presence in the UK and Australia, and slowly creeping our way east. So our international presence is growing and growing and growing at a really exponential rate, which is great. So hopefully it will become the standard globally. That's what we're hoping for.
I'm seeing it. Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
Can I just wanted to make one VisFX comment, something we had talked about before, and there's also I know we're running out of time, and there's so many great questions too that I'm seeing in the chat. But in terms of like when post starts, visual effects, by the way, is often going to start, before you even have a green light on your movie. At times, I had a film recently where, we had one of the main characters needed to, by the end of a show, started a little dumpy and needed to be literally ripped and shredded at the end of it. And so we were going to need to figure out what's the smartest way to do face replacement. We needed to be able to show this person at different phases. Was the actor who hadn't even been cast yet at the time when we started these conversations going to be sort of the middle one, the beginning one? We're going to be making her bigger, smaller, what we're going to do, body doubling. And so those conversations not only had to happen early so we could understand what that facial replacement is going to look like now. And there's amazing things. There's like real-time face replacement you can do on set, which is insane. But also we needed to have this locked in order to cast, because one of the questions that our lead actors were asking us was, how are you going to handle this? I don't want to look like an idiot. And that was needed in order to cast the movie. And that's a little chicken and egg, because we needed to spend some money on that in order to get those concepts and do that research. And that was immediately with a very experienced VFX supervisor and a company that does this and another company that does this. But like, that's, it can start, you could need VisFX, for example, before you even have a movie. So this stuff can start really, really early.
It's so funny that you're talking about this, because it was just this morning that I watched a trailer for the Bob Zemeckis film Here, which I think comes out in November, which is reuniting the Forrest Gump cast, right? And they're using AI for facial. Mm-hmm. The movie takes place over decades, and there's all this facial work that's being done digitally on Tom Hanks, and and now I forgot the name of the woman.
There was a company called Deep Voodoo, and I saw them do a demo. And as you know, I don't think I've been speechless for 20 years. I couldn't. I literally was stammering. This demo was so impressive in real time. I mean, literally some like go off camera and now they're wearing Jim Carrey's face. They even come back and they wear Arnold Schwarzenegger's face. And the lighting is responding to their face. And this is real time.
Yeah. So, well, listen, I think that's a great way to close. I want to thank you guys, all of you. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And I know Natalie will come back with some housekeeping issues, but I really, really, really appreciate all your insight. Thanks. And your friendship.
Happy to do it and happy to be on this panel with some of my favorite people. And I think we should go through these questions. I think you have a whole nother panel, by the way, in these questions. I think
There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue. I'm actually going to bring up a resource that we want to share, and thank you, panelists, for everything that you have discussed with us today. Entertainment Partners recently launched a new networking platform, a community site called The Production Lot. And there you can find and have access to all of our experts throughout the EP ecosystem, our wonderful guest panelists that have joined us on events. And there you can join for free. You can post questions. You can start discussion threads. You can access exclusive content, the latest industry news, and you can find mentors and you can connect and you can grow your network. Maybe even find your next career opportunity. So we really want to encourage everyone who's joined us today to head over to the production lot. You can scan that QR code and you can join and you can keep the conversation going and ask John and our other experts additional questions. Here is a discussion thread that we've actually started for you. So if you just click into that discussion thread, you can post your questions and we will do our best to get back to you in a timely manner. Thank you again to our wonderful panel for joining us today. And thank you, John, for everything. As a reminder, if you happen to need any assistance with any of your incentives work, any of your financing in North America, the UK, Australia, and beyond, our team of experts is here to ensure that you get the best financing guidance in the industry. You can explore the tools at ep.com/production incentives to take a look at our incentives estimator, our jurisdiction comparison tools, and you can also get in touch with John and the team for any assistance with tax credit placement or minimum guarantee financing. Again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your audience viewership as always, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next Master Series.